This week on World Traveler Cooking, we're going to make the quintessential Northern European spring treat, rhubarb cake. Now, today I'm working with a Lithuanian recipe, but you can find very similar cakes throughout Scandinavia, Germany, obviously throughout the rest of the Baltics and elsewhere. I would consider this to be a pretty standard Northern European thing. I actually wanted to do two different videos, one of the Swedish version, one of the Lithuanian version, but then as I started planning it out, I realized they were just too similar, so I figured I'd just do one. At any rate, you'll find these sorts of things if you're in Sweden at just about any of the small bakeries in the spring. You'll find them pretty much same thing in Germany, and I would assume Lithuania also. So we're going to make this. Now, I've managed to obtain some rhubarb here in Indonesia. This time, because I'm recording several months in advance, I've managed to get it from Australia. Obviously this would be much better if it were locally sourced. But this looks quite fresh, so I'm excited to go for this. For the ingredients, we have 220 grams of flour, 200 grams of sweet cream butter at room temperature. I have some vanilla syrup here. In Northern Europe, you'd usually use vanilla sugar, but can't get that here in Indonesia, and this is basically a syrup with vanilla flavor in it, so we'll use that instead. 4 eggs, varying sizes. I have a teaspoon and a half of baking powder, a pinch of salt, 200 grams of sugar, and 400 grams of our favorite thing in this dish, the rhubarb. So from this point on, we'll just go ahead and get started. I don't expect this to take too much time or too much effort. We'll probably have a pretty short video for you today, but this is absolutely delicious. So, let's get started. So, we're going to beat the eggs and sugar together. I've softened the butter to room temperature, or almost room temperature. I'm not sure I want it all the way at room temperature here in Indonesia. I'm going to beat this together for some minutes until it's fluffy. You can of course use a hand mixer. You don't need a stand mixer for this. But I have a stand mixer and I don't have a hand mixer, so that's what we're going to use. I'll be back when this is done. So here goes egg number 1. We're just going to let that beat in for a few moments before we add egg number 2. I'm going to continue doing that with all 4 eggs. See, once it has a nice smooth texture, we add our next one. So at this point I'm going to add my vanilla. Now this would be like 2 teaspoons of vanilla sugar. I'm not really sure what the equivalent is here, so I'm just going to pour some in. That ought to be about, that seems like it might be reasonable. If you're in the US, maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then I'm just going to run this again for a few more minutes, just to get everything incorporated, and then I'll start adding my dry ingredients. So I've added the, after I've whisked the ingredients, I've added them in here on using the pour guard, and now they're well integrated. So you can see you have a really thick batter. Again, you could do all this with a hand mixer. You don't need a stand mixer for it, but this is what I have at the moment. And the stand mixer, frankly, is easier. So next, I'm going to start pouring this into the cake shape, and we'll assemble it. You can see how nice and thick this batter is. Now I'm going to use a cake pan that I have lined with baking paper or parchment. Please note, if you're using a round pan like this, it helps to trim the corners. I have very occasionally had problems where the corners end up elevated and eventually catch fire. So into this I'm going to spread about half of my batter. Looks about right. Sort of as a base. And you don't have to use a round pan. You could use a smaller square pan or a larger square pan if you want something thinner, whatever you like. But this doesn't seem like a lot of batter at first, so we're going to use this particular pan here. Okay, and then on top of this we'll start laying out our rhubarb, and we can basically push it into the dough a little bit if we like, or the batter a little bit if we like. But I'm going to save the strips to put on top. You'll see why in a moment. So spread this out roughly evenly, and then we'll cover it with the rest of our batter. Of course, I've already preheated my oven to 180. It is important to preheat the oven. 180 Celsius, that's about 350 or so Fahrenheit. And once I get this all kind of in place, the table's nice and clean, so then I'll decorate the top. So now that I have the next part done, I'm just going to lay these pieces out decoratively on top. And I may have to adjust the width when I get, yeah, I'm going to have to adjust the width. These are way too close together. Alright, and then this is going to go into the oven for around half an hour, and then I'll be back. And here the cake is after it's been in the oven. This is looking really good. I'm going to let it cool down a bit, and I'll be back to taste it maybe in an hour or so. As I say, I'm really excited about this. Alright, so to serve or plate this, so I have an extra kind of thin piece of rhubarb here that I didn't really count on having, which is fine. But I'm going to just go ahead and cut a thin slice out for the taste test and pull it out like you would a piece of cake. If you were to look at the inside of it here, you'll see that the rhubarb just kind of cooks into the middle, and you also have some rhubarb on the top. So that's this. Now in Sweden, of course, the primary way to eat something like this would be with a vanilla sauce on top. But I don't see that in Germany or the Lithuanian recipes or things like that. So we're just going to eat this as it is. And this is how I'll do the taste test. And now for the taste test. I really like this. This is really tangy. relatively sour, a bit sweet, but it's not like overwhelmingly sweet. It is, you get like the full flavor of the rhubarb coming through in this cake. Yeah, in fact, this is one of the reasons why, to me, this is sort of one of the ideal like springtime or summer treats. This is absolutely delicious. Now, if you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription from you. And please check out my Patreon page where you can get access to early content. For example, I am recording this right now in November, and it will be released in April or late March. So you can get access to content, 3 to 5 months before it becomes generally available. Please also, if you make this sort of dish and you make it a little differently, feel free to note how you do it differently in the comments. I think it's great when, as cooks, we trade techniques and ideas with each other. At any rate, recipes in the description. Bon appetit, and see you next week.